Good morning, Metalheads here, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And today we're looking at the sophomore album from Sons of Apollo entitled 2020, or as it's literally noted in the title, MMXX. Although if I was a gambling man, I would say that it's meant to say 2020. Just throwing that out there. This is the second studio album from American progressive metal supergroup Sons of Apollo, and when I say supergroup, I do in fact mean super, because there is an insane amount of talent assembled in this band. On vocals, you've got Jeff Scott Soto, who's worked with Yngwie Malmsteen in the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. On guitar, you've got Ram Bumblefoot Thal, a virtuoso guitarist and a former member of Guns N' Roses. On bass, you've got Billy Sheen, a longtime member of Mr. Big, also known for some work with David Lee Roth and Steve Vai. On the keyboards, you've got Derek Sherinian, a one-time member of Dream Theater, who's also worked with Alice Cooper and Billy Idol. And rounding out the lineup on drums is the one and only Mike fucking Portnoy, most famously known for his own stint in Dream Theater, but since leaving that band, he has been going back and forth between all kinds of different projects, including Adrenaline Mob, Avenged Sevenfold, Twisted Sister, Metal Allegiance. Supposedly he has a project in the works right now with Bobby Blitz of Overkill on top of all that. He's also continued to perform with some even smaller projects such as Transatlantic, Flying Colors, The Winery Dogs. I mean, back in college, me and some of my other metalhead friends would joke that if we pressed a shuffle on any one of our iPods, every song would somehow have Gene Hoglan on it. But in 2020, that joke feels better suited to someone like Mike Portnoy. I mean, the guy's all over the fucking place. Back to the matter at hand, though. Sons of Apollo, clearly comprised of some very talented people. Objectively, inarguably talented people. And you would think that such a union of creative minds would immediately excite and intrigue people, and you're not entirely wrong. I mean, it is inherently kind of cool to see and wonder what these guys would come up with, but unfortunately I have yet to be swayed by Sons of Apollo, as their debut album left absolutely no impression on me whatsoever. Again, I won't argue that these guys are not insanely talented, because they are, but that debut album was just a collection of recycled prog metal stereotypes and cliches, and ultimately didn't really feature anything that exciting, interesting, or entertaining. Hell, they didn't even really sound like they were that into what they were doing on that album, to be entirely honest with you, or at least that's how I felt coming out of it. And what really worried me coming out of that album is the fact that all of these people are very busy currently with a lot of different projects, particularly Mike Portnoy. Why should I assume for a moment that if they decide to work on another Sons of Apollo record, that they would actually put their all into it, that they would even have the time to do that? So as a result of all this, I went into Sons of Apollo still a little optimistic, but extremely cautiously optimistic. Would Sons of Apollo serve me the same microwave leftovers out of a Tupperware container, or would they send me a roast rack of lamb with mashed potatoes and au jus and asparagus? Unfortunately, the bad news is we lean closer towards the former. We are still getting leftovers. The good news, though, is that Sons of Apollo at the very least had the common sense to not simply nuke a bowl of noodles in the microwave. They took the time to season everything that needed to be seasoned, to adjust the things that needed to be adjusted, and to come into this album with a lot more enthusiasm, energy, and confidence. Sure, 2020 doesn't taste particularly fresh, but to Sons of Apollo's credit, it still kind of does the job if you're looking for a collection of silly, fun prog metal jams, which I imagine a lot of people tuning into this kind of thing are looking for. So yeah, I guess it's okay. There's a lot more unity and equity, and it's mixed a lot better, and as a result, I do hear actually a lot of passion and hard work and determination coming out of this thing. The songs, while not drastically different as far as their blueprints are concerned, also generally benefit from this burst of enthusiasm, from this burst of energy. The songs have legitimate oomph to them. They have a real kick, a real bounce to them. Opening track Goodbye Divinity, for instance, starts the album with an incredibly epic chorus and some slamming massive walls of keyboards from Derek Sherinian. I mean, Derek is just pounding his fist in those keyboards like a school bully asking for your lunch money. Hell, come to think of it, it may even be my favorite song on the record, if we're being entirely honest. Following track, Wither to Black, is great as well. I love the big pounding grooves in this thing, and Derek once again shining on keyboards. I like the hook. I like the rough and tough, rowdy energy of this whole thing. Asphyxiation is cool too. It tightens some of those grooves and retains the classic prog influences. It even kind of reminds me of a weird fusion between the Buried in Me and some early 90s Dream Theater. I can even find myself jamming with something like Desolate July, which is a lot moodier and almost crosses over into some, in my opinion, cheesy territory, but it's passionately performed, and there's a particularly great guitar solo from Ron Thal here, who reaches back to his time with Guns N' Roses to deliver a surprisingly tasteful, soulful, lavish guitar solo. Now from here on, the album does begin to lose me a little bit, as Sons of Apollo start taking less risks, and the ones that they do take don't really pan out in their favor. Take, for instance, King of Delusion, which opens on a very odd classical intro, which sounds perfectly fine separated from the song, but is never interwoven into the song, and it becomes kind of glaring and awkward when you start to get into the actual song and you find out that it just kind of sounds like Black Label Society attempting to write a Dream Theater track. Like, songs before had already adopted a bit of a rowdy heavy metal vibe, but King of Delusion takes it into some semi-silly territory, particularly when you can practically hear Jeff pumping his fists in the air when he goes, "Yeah!" throughout this track, and throughout some other tracks as well, may I add. The following two tracks from there on are kind of forgettable. This is where I begin to notice how predictable the general formula of the album is, and by the time we get to final track, New World Today, I've kind of clocked out, and that has a lot to do with the fact that this song is unnecessarily almost 16 minutes long, and shows the entirety of Sons of Apollo eventually indulging in some pure musical wankery, just jamming away for the sake of it. To its credit, it's so flashy and cheesy that it does begin as something kind of entertaining, but it just drags on for way too fucking long, and I find myself turning that track off about 3 minutes before it's supposed to actually wrap up. While I did enjoy a good half of this album, and generally enjoyed everything else from the confidence to the determination of this record, I'm still kind of disappointed that for the second time, Sons of Apollo have failed to create anything really all that new or exciting, that they have continued to rely on prog metal cliches and stereotypes, and as a result have made something inherently very predictable. At no point in this record was I really that shocked by anything going on. At no point did this progressive metal album ever progress into anything. It's almost paint by numbers, like you just kind of go, here's the keyboard solo, here's the big inspiring chorus, here's the wild drum fill, here's the lavish soulful guitar solo that would make James LaBrie piss his pants with joy. For all these reasons, I'm going to give this a very low 3 out of 5, but a 3 out of 5 nonetheless. I'll still acknowledge the great talent that has been assembled here. I'll still say that this is, all things considered, a really enjoyable album with a lot of great melodies and a lot of great riffs and drum parts and bass parts, and I'll say that prog metal nerds are probably going to have a fucking blast with this, particularly those who have been upset with the more modern Dream Theater, as I think this hits a lot of the same notes that people are looking for in them. But if Sons of Apollo wants me to return next time around, they're gonna have to show me something other than reheated leftovers. I get the feeling I could very well end up being in the minority on this. If that's the case, then so be it. I mean, I won't knock you for enjoying this. I certainly did enjoy a lot out of it, and Sons of Apollo did improve on a lot of key elements. So, like I said, I'll still give this a 3 out of 5. Not an enthusiastic one at all, but a 3 out of 5 nonetheless. If you're looking for a good, fun batch of well-produced prog metal and you don't mind things being a little cheesy and dumb and generic in some parts, then go nuts. You're probably gonna have a fucking ball. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, and you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.